We just put it one flip of a switch. So I asked if you were ready. Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Joshua Pantellaresco. I write stuff, draw stuff, apparently, and broadcast too. And I'm still figuring out the new catchphrase. I've kind of evolved in the last year. My guess, I'm afraid to say this, I don't want her to beat me because they might. You can look at her. She's tough. You can definitely tell. Swati Chavda. Did I get that
Yes,
right?
you're right. Absolutely correct.
Yes. She joins us. Swati is a writer, poet, artist, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Am I missing something? I feel like I'm missing something big, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I got all of them.
I'm an editor and I'm a neurosurgeon.
Neurosurgeon. So
Yes.
okay. So welcome to the show. I've known Swati for 3 years. About that,
Yes,
3 years.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, we've talked off and on. We've told terrible jokes to each other over the years, but we've never actually physically seen each other face to face.
Yes.
It's changed. Nice to
Good.
meet you.
Nice to meet you, Josh.
Yes. So everything you've heard about me is probably true. Just saying. I'm gonna warn you up front. So
Of course.
yeah,
Of course.
of course. So anyway, Swati, I've been wanting to have you on because honestly, you're just super talented, and I'm like, and I just feel like you add something to it. I gotta let you know something. Your reading was the most popular reading episode of my podcast. It was really, really, really. Whoever you told, whoever you like, it was amazing. A lot of people came out to support you. So, okay, so I'm gonna start here. So, if I feel like with you're kind of you're both like a lot of some artists are like very very artsy, and some people are very 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 structured. And what I've noticed in the last, I'd say 20 years, those sides have become a lot closer. But I still feel like everybody starts with a discipline one way or the other. So for you, it sounds to me like neuroscience takes a huge commitment. So was your love in the sciences or in the arts when you first got rolling here?
I would say that science and art are actually the same, two sides of the same coin. So I don't really separate the two. It's like they are like the two strands of the same DNA. And I don't think you can have good science without having an artistic temperament. And I think it's also hard to do good art without having some sort of a scientific thinking.
Yeah, no,
So
I totally agree with that. Actually, I
yeah,
think
yeah,
so. What art and science have in common is they're both essentially problem solving, right?
yeah,
The kind of problems aren't always the same, but although they are oddly more similar than different, more often than not, there are some differences in terms of approach. But essentially, it's the problem. It's the actually maybe the only real difference, honestly, is the language. If that
yes,
actually makes sense, it's the language of how
yes,
it's done. They're both telling stories, but in very different ways. Telling stories, solving problems. You're trying to make sure that everybody's brains are relatively healthy, which is a very different thing. You're playing with you're doing brain chemistry, connecting cells together really close, making sure everything is functioning. And that's a very different language than coming up with a poem about roses are red, but I'm being very simplistic here. But I do feel like in both cases, imagination and the problem solving approach is probably the biggest two things they have in common.
I would say so. And I think the gaps in science, which we cannot really fill, because I mean, obviously, human brain has its limitations. We cannot really observe everything. Like there's something called observer bias, and it is right now whatever science we have, it has its limitations because we cannot find the answer to everything. And I think art provides us the next set of questions which we need to answer. Because just without having that extra imagination and that little bit of wonky thinking which art needs, science cannot really progress. It just becomes very rigid.
Absolutely. I think well, honestly, I mean, I look at North America. A lot of our scientific discoveries did not come from a lot of the formal training. It came from just informal, again, problem solving. There was a problem and it was looking for an ingenuitive way to solve a problem. And the conventional, I'm not going to say in every case it's in this way, but sometimes the conventions we put ourselves in they're limitations. They're not necessarily useful. It's good to have rules, but you have to and have structure. But you also at some point have to go, okay, I understand how this works. Now, how do I bend this? How can I see this in a different way?
Yes, for sure, for sure. And also, I feel that science, like art, is more analog compared to science, and it fills the gap between discrete points many times, and it just allows science to stretch more. It allows it to grow a bit more. Also, I feel science also helps art because sometimes art is so flim flam, and you are just imagination can just spread out too much, and it can just go out of control. So science or maybe scientific thinking, it allows us to give a structure to art, and it helps to contain it. It provides a discipline which art can sometimes lack.
So I have a buddy, like one of my people I collaborate and draw with. You give him a blank page, he's like he can't. He's like, oh my god, what do I do? You give him a couple structural things.
Yes.
Now he's creative. Now he's
Yes.
able to rock and roll, and he
Yeah.
does amazing things. Sometimes our limitations actually force us to be creative, and it actually enables us to look at things. The structure we have forces us sometimes to look at reimagine things very, very differently, and that's actually a great thing. If you have no structure, I'm not saying that you can't. Like, there are people that like I'm kind of crazy, but so I can do it. But there are people out there that can't. It's hard to function without it. It really, really is. We all need even. I'm not like every one of us on some level needs structure, just a touch of it, and even if it's like, okay, get up. Did I brush my teeth today? Did I like a basic structure is good for all of us.
For sure.
Yeah. So, okay, so since you didn't really see them separate, so did you so have you always told stories then? And then why are you pursuing your scientific career? Is that's been your deal?
Yeah, I think it was always telling stories was always a part of my nature. I remember when I was 3 years old, we lived in a very old-fashioned, old type of house, it was a huge house which has central courtyard, and all our extended families lived all around the courtyard. So we have my uncles and aunts and their families and all. They had their own special units surrounding the courtyard. So I was one side of the that house. There was one creek which was flowing there, and obviously I was 3 years old, so my whole existence focus stayed around doing mischief. So I used to go to my uncle's house, which was overlooking that creek, and I used to throw all the tiny things which would fit between the bars of the window and just throw out of there. So I was forbidden from venturing out of my own house, and my grandma was meant to guard me. She was supposed to make sure I don't go anywhere beyond that threshold. So I started telling her stories, and that story it grew out of one small, there was a mountain, and inside the mountain it was hollow, and there was an animal kingdom, and blah blah blah. So that story grew from that, and it had several episodes. So I used to use that to put my grandma to sleep, and at least basically get her to lower her guard, and then I used to escape. So I think that's where my storytelling started.
Oh, that reminds me of like an old fairy tale about a king that would murder his wives. So his one wife just started doing just told stories, and he would leave cliffhangers at the end of every night. The king wouldn't kill her,
Yes.
and eventually, he decided to spare her anyway. But she was just such a good storyteller.
Yeah, it's the Arabian Nights. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I have this interesting theory. So, did you fool your grandma, or did your grandma like feel like you actually deserved it for all the imagination and work? Because that's an interesting. Because sometimes my grandmother raised 5 boys before I ever came her brothers and Uncle Andrew and my dad. And so when I came around, I had no chance. I had like none, like zero. So. But every once in a while, she let me get away with stuff anyway because she just knew that it's a good, healthy thing to let something go.
Yeah.
Right. So, so what do you think? Do you think you got smarter than your grandmother? Or did your grandmother sometimes just give it to you?
I think that's definitely a possibility. She must have thought, oh, she's going to so much effort, I should at least reward her with something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you were gonna figure out a way out anyway. I think at
Yes.
some point, just it's something tells me if you really want something, you're gonna make it happen.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
it's not a question of if, it's when. It's
Yeah.
like, so do you fight the tide or do you embrace the tide? You know?
It depends on whether. Sometimes, if I'm really depleted, I just allow myself to go with the flow and not fight it, and then I use that phase to restore myself. And then once I'm strong, once all my once I'm no longer depleted, I get back and fight it. But I think in the end, yeah, my goal is always towards fighting it and getting what I want. But I don't always go for it if I feel that my resources are not fully with me right now. So
Oh, well, how to put this? You're calculated in your choices, if that makes sense. Like you know what you want, but you make it like it's almost like a game. Like you play chess, you go for a piece.
yes,
You want the king. You want the king. But sometimes
yes,
you got to go through different obstacles, different walls. You're gonna have to sacrifice some pieces here and there.
yeah,
And you seem
yeah.
like that kind of person where you'll say, okay, I'm going to calculate, is this worth it? And that's actually probably the question you have in your head sometimes. It's not, I want
Yeah.
it, but is it worth it? And sometimes the answer is, so sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the
Yes,
answer is no, but I want it anyway. And I can probably, and
yes,
there's probably like one, two, three. And sometimes and sometimes because you are a storyteller, ergo you
yeah,
probably still are a little,
yeah.
how old were you when you were telling stories to your grandmother? Like three,
I
four,
was
five.
three. Yeah, I was three. Yeah,
So that 3-year-old is still inside you somewhere. And
yeah.
like, you know what? Sometimes she wins. Sometimes she
True,
wins that
true.
battle.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. And
yeah.
that can actually be dangerous as well, because I think when, like, people like us, when we can spin a narrative, sometimes we spin a narrative to ourselves, and we can spin it the way we want to look at it. And that can actually, I mean, in the past when I was less mature, I have actually ended up fooling myself that way, and the consequences are sometimes not good. So that's something I have learned to watch for now.
Oh, we are all guilty of this. Like
Yeah.
just the fact that we all have bias. Something we talked about.
Right.
Like we
Yeah.
all have this
Yeah.
ability to spin a story
Yeah.
any way we want to.
Yeah.
I just try to be honest enough to say, okay, I can be fooled.
Yeah.
Like, right, I can be fooled. I
Yeah.
can be a sucker.
Yeah.
I Here's the thing though, I'm okay with being a sucker sometimes. Like
True. True.
sometimes you know what, it's a good learning experience.
Yes.
Um sometimes it's fun. I mean, I don't. There are three things I've learned. If you're not afraid to look foolish, you're not afraid to look bad, and if you're not afraid to just go for it,
Yeah.
there's not much in this world that can stop you. Actually,
True. Yeah. That I fully agree with that. And I think that's the problem with many people have, that they are afraid to fail and they're afraid to look foolish. And I think unless you stop being afraid of that, you're never going to be able to go for big things. Because if when you go for big things, you will invariably encounter those kind of things. And so what? So what if you look like a fool? So what if you fail?
yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
part of life. Like, look, I've said
Yeah.
this in other
Yeah.
podcasts. I got my ass has fallen off the bicycle a few times. I'm sure you have too. And
Yes.
that's life. Like
Yes.
we all go through
Mm.
pain. We all go through pain. Pain's part of life.
Yes.
It's a very natural order of things.
Yeah.
The question you have to ask yourself, and then the question is the pain worth whatever reward it is you seek? Because
Mm.
the only thing bad at that point is if you quit.
Yes.
Because if you go through all that pain,
Yeah.
whatever your sacrifice, and then you
Mm.
stop, what are
Mm.
you doing? You
Yeah.
know?
True.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah.
Mm. Like, even when you would have started your podcast, obviously, like, you would have learned things along the way, and you're so much better today than what you would have been for your first podcast. And unless you would have taken that step, you wouldn't have been where you are right now.
Well, it's interesting because there was a couple points I almost quit, like because I wasn't sure anyone was listening. To be perfectly honest with you,
Yeah.
and it was really 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 interesting to me because there was this point that I was like, okay, so I'm going to I was at I think episode 140 something. It's like, is anyone really listening to this?
Yeah.
Then I get an email. Literally the next day, I get an email. Dear Aurora Award-winning Aurora Final. It's like, wow, how did I get here? Someone was listening. Someone was paying attention,
For
and
sure.
and that's we all. I think all of us, I think, need reassurance that kind of what we do
Yes.
matters. I think that's a very
Yeah.
honest ego thing, right? Look, I don't want. I want to tell stories that people want to read. I want to have a podcast people want to listen to, or in this now watch. I can't believe how much this has evolved in the last year. But the only way to do that is you got to put yourself out there and you got to let people just come and make their
For
own
sure.
decisions, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. And I'm taking chances. Like this is not my normal podcast time. It's 5 o'clock in the morning here. How 3 o'clock in the afternoon there, or 3:30 in the
Yeah.
afternoon?
3:30. Yeah. 3:30.
3:30
Yeah.
in the afternoon there.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I decided I wanted to do an international week because and I think it's really cool that I do have people that listen to the podcast all over the world. And number two, we have this amazing gift right now. I've had like for all the crazy that's gone on in the last year, and we can all admit that last year was kind of shitty. We can all acknowledge that, but there were some good things that came out of it, and one of them is okay. And I never took this for granted. You're in India. I'm in Canada.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation as if we were there. Now it's not quite the same. I would much rather. I would much rather it be face to face over, say, a
Exactly.
coffee or
A
whatever.
beer. A beer. Yeah. I
Right?
can do with a beer. Yeah. After
Yeah,
this
beer.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Beer would be fantastic, right? We'd have a beer.
Yes.
Like
Exactly.
so. Okay, that's good to know. I'll
Yeah.
keep that in mind when we meet in person. Swati,
Yes.
beer.
Yes. Because I'm in a dry state right now. I'm in the state of India where alcohol is prohibited. So for last year and a half, I haven't had a drop of alcohol, and I think everyone can understand that 2020 you needed a lot of alcohol to get through, and I had to do without alcohol.
I didn't drink very much, honestly.
No, yeah,
No. I again, this is like my second apocalypse. My first
yeah,
one was much more personal.
yeah,
After you go through your own kind of thing, I
yeah,
kind of thought like it didn't hit me the same way.
yeah,
Part of it's my circumstances too, but another part of it's just like, you know what? Honestly,
yeah,
this will pass in one way or the other. I think
yeah,
I did three. I made myself. I wrote about this a little bit. One of the big promises I had when this started, because I was in Vancouver when this started. I literally I've never seen the streets of Vancouver empty before. I saw them empty for the
yeah,
first time right near the end of my
yeah,
time there. And this homeless guy came up to me. I was taking the train. I had to take. This is during the COVID when it started. I was an
yeah,
essential worker, so I had to take 2 trains and a bus home every night.
yeah,
And I'm at Vancouver's downtown station. This guy comes up to me and goes, "Hey, you got a pen?" I'm like, he's got a pad. He wants to draw, and I look for it. I don't have one, so I'm sorry, man. I looked, and it's like, oh well, thanks. And he puts his hand out as a handshake, and it hit me right there how cruel the world was this year, and I made a decision to kind of right there and then. It's like, it might damn me. I don't care. I'm not going to be cruel to anybody. I don't care who. Like I'm not going to pick fights. I'm not going to. Take. Like I'm not interested in the politics of COVID one way or the other. Masking, mask,
yeah,
vaccine. I don't care. Like I truly do not care.
yeah.
That argument is far more meaningless than people I think realize.
I agree.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, right, I said I'm going to be the best human being I can to each and every person, and it was kind of like one of my 3 promises to myself, and I kept it. I think by and large, to the we all had our crazy moments last year. We all had those moments here and there, and like there are some things coming up that I'm sure this year I'm going to be like, I don't know if this is a good idea, but we're also in a very we're we're in both a unique time and then not in one sense nothing's changed at all. It's amazing to me. And so
Yeah.
I'm babbling on here, but what I'm basically saying is because of my approach, I did not feel I just I can't do it. I
Yeah.
can't be stressed about
No.
this. And
No.
that
No. I
right.
think that's essentially, yeah, that's essentially how I approached this year, because that was and one thing is, I mean, obviously I'm at my mother's place, so at least I'm taken care of. I'm not completely
Yeah.
alone. I have people to talk to. But it definitely hit me hard in some ways, because I was supposed to, like, entire 2019 I was in India because I was taking care of some of the things here, my mother's health and all that stuff. And just when I was supposed to come back to Canada, this happened. And for me, just not being able to walk out in nature or climb mountains, that kind of thing, it really hits me more than people, not meeting people. And here I'm in the middle of a city which is, it's massive. Like, it's probably, it's not one of the major cities in India, and still it's probably bigger than one of the.
Oh,
Mhm.
the population like density
Yeah.
in India.
Yeah.
I mean, there is nothing in
Exactly.
Canada that comes close to
Yeah,
that.
nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah,
All right.
and this just concrete jungle. You don't. When I look out of the window, I don't see trees. I mean, I see occasional trees, but it's like I have to really look for it. I just see a few birds once in a while. So it's very dry and very distressing, actually, that way. I think I would have probably. I wouldn't have even noticed this pandemic if I had some place where I could walk around with a lot of trees around me and that kind of stuff.
Well, okay, I'm in Windsor. We're it's weird. It's kind of weird how the approach here. It's so awkward. I thought North America, I think, was very hypocritical in its approach to COVID in a lot of ways. And but I mean, I've been walking around the whole
Yeah.
time. It just
Yeah.
I need my sanity. I need
Yeah.
my sanity. I'm not going out of my way to make contact or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I'm walking,
Yeah.
I'm exploring, I'm
For
going
sure.
outside because
Yeah.
I need that. If I
Yeah.
don't have that, I will go nuts.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And like I said, it's also like I mean, but I am making myself a promise. By the time
Yeah.
summertime rolls around, I'm probably going to be traveling somewhere else in Canada. Just
Yeah.
because, right or wrong, we can't stay like this forever either.
No. No.
At some point, it has to give. I think it gives in the summer. I don't think. I think by the end of this year, there's going to be no
Mm.
lockdowns because I don't see them lasting
No.
anywhere. I
No.
just don't. I think there's a fatigue. There's also, I mean, there's a fatigue to it, but there's also just the reality of the situation is
Yeah.
COVID, regardless of the vaccine, how it works, how it
Yeah.
doesn't work, COVID's
Yeah.
going to be around.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
some point, we're going to have to live in it at some, and that's just the way it is.
For
Now,
sure. Yeah.
it wasn't the 1918 flu.
Yeah.
Is it something to respect? Yes. But at the same time, you're going to be like, life's got to go on at some point.
I agree, and especially for people who don't have money stored up, they cannot just live without doing something. I mean, small businesses and all, they've been hit really hard,
Small
and
businesses got
yeah,
destroyed here.
exactly.
Unless they
Yes.
had an online model already, they
Yeah.
got destroyed because
Yeah.
again the one of the hypocrisies kind of happened here was oh yeah I mean we took care of people with serve, but anyone with a small business didn't really get help until a
Yeah.
lot farther into the pandemic, and by that time for most of them it was too
Yeah.
late.
For sure.
Yeah, so um, like I said, this year we're
Mm.
gonna have to come out. This year we're gonna have to. We got some big
Yeah.
decisions to make of how we want to live going forward too. And the world has changed. I think in some ways for the in the long run, maybe even for the better. Like time will tell on that. Um, I just know that for me, I've been I have a temp job. Ironically enough, so doing very similar work to what I did before. Um, I'm again. My goal now is the next 2 months is to get heck, even a security license just to do something completely different. But also,
Yeah.
I might be going back to school. I mean, it's something
Yeah.
I considered this year
Mm.
um, is okay. I've been broadcasting now for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm good at it. I could be
Yeah.
wrong about that, but I think I'm pretty good at it. I I don't think I necessarily need the piece of paper to say I'm awesome and made of cheese. But if I were to go get a piece of paper that said I was awesome and made of cheese, that would be the piece of paper to go
For
into,
sure. I agree.
right?
And I've seen your interviews, like video interviews, some of them. You're really good at it. And you have that I think you understand human psyche quite well, and that helps you draw people out, like even when people may be a bit shy or awkward initially, but I've seen that several of your interviews you have managed to draw them out, and people have become quite comfortable. So you definitely have a knack for that. You should go for it.
Yeah, no, I'm totally gonna go for it. I mean, the question is like the question for me is, do I keep doing what I'm doing? Which on some levels, yes, I'm almost a Twitch affiliate. I'm at like 30 followers right now, which is like I only need like 20 more, and I'm there. I think I get there by the end of the month.
Yeah.
So I gave myself until March 21st.
Yeah.
Right after March 21st, I will one way or the other. I'm going to be like, okay, it's time to move on to the next level. Now, this month, while I'm here, I'm going to be looking at different universities at different parts in Canada. People are like, whatever. I'm a little awkward paying a full tuition if I'm going to be digital, because call me a bit cynical, but I don't feel I should be paying full price if I'm at home.
I agree. I agree. I mean, you're not using so many facilities which you would otherwise be using.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's some things that need to be thought of. And by the way, this isn't a knock to any of the teachers, because honestly, you guys are working like 3 times harder right now than you should be actually. Note to Canadians listening to this. Honestly, especially teachers should be getting a raise right now for everything they're doing. I'm not saying that like lightly. The fact of the matter is they're putting in at least twice to 3 times the effort right now, and they're not getting compensated for it. And that's one of the other things that really bothers me about this time is I don't want to get clapped. Yay, essential worker. No, hate me.
I agree. And the teachers, they're taking so much risk as well. Like, then on one hand, they say people shouldn't get together and schools are packed. And
Well,
kids are not, yeah.
that's the hypocrisy. Like, here's an interesting thought: would there have been a second wave in Canada if we had actually kept the students home? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right? Probably not. We would have probably it probably would have been. It probably would have been. We might have still have had like an increase here and there, but it wouldn't have been like it is right now. It would have been probably a lot smaller. It would have been a lot more.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot more manageable. We don't have the population here. The only way we're gonna really spread this is if we get that super close, 200 kids together, and when we can't have a social gathering of 10 people,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And the fact of the matter, like I said, it's why there's again, I've said this many a time on my own social media. There's a credibility issue at North. I don't know how you guys dealt with it in India, but I imagine you didn't put people back to school. I imagine it was probably very much stay home. Here's money. Fuck off.
Yes. Yeah, I think India has managed it quite well given the population and lack of resources. I think it could have been a lot worse. And obviously, I mean, number wise, India is one of the highest infected countries. But then population density,
you have a billion people there.
Yeah,
you're gonna have
I
it.
think exactly.
Right?
So I think the people have made sensible decisions. We were one of the earliest countries to declare a nationwide lockdown, like initially when it started. And I think if people had been a little more responsible initially, then things would have been better. Actually, it's just that initially people didn't. People came out and mingled, and despite the lockdown.
Well, it wasn't. We've heard here's the problem. We were kind of already dense to this anyway. Like we had SARS. That didn't really seem to impact people. We had a couple other flus in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That they were supposed to be these big bad boogeymen, and they weren't. They were nothing.
True.
Even this, although it's been dangerous, it wasn't as dangerous as projected either. It was smaller. Still maybe SARS MERS levels, but not the 1% of the population is going to die level. I think even if things had run amok, we would never have gotten to that height. So there was there was a real, and especially North America, who sees it maybe, like India's seen pandemics before, Japan's seen pandemics before, and I feel like Japan handled it better than anybody did
Yeah.
overall. They didn't like, right.
Yeah.
If you look at any country that had a pandemic before, they did their own thing. They actually ignored things like, we got this, leave us alone, right? And we got this, we know what we're doing. And the reason, but here, because we're rich and spoiled here, right? And that's an honest
Yeah. No,
assessment.
I agree because not just India, all the other South Asian countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all of them have done well compared to the population density and the lack of resources. I think all these neighboring countries of India, they've also done well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes just having fewer resources, it makes you a bit more resilient also. So that also might help.
Well, it's just the concept of like wealth. Like you have, like there's a lot more. You guys are some of the older nations on the planet. There's nothing you really haven't seen before. There's like literally, like in your thousands of years of history, you've had technologies before we did. You've had ideologies that probably weren't that different than what we have today, right? You've decided, fuck all that. We're gonna live right. That's basically like that was your conclusion. I feel North America, Canada's 160, 170 years old, maybe. United States is 300 years old. Like in comparison, we're very young countries compared to India, and we're still outgrowing a lot of the stuff you guys experienced thousands of years ago. Doesn't mean like you don't have your problems. You do,
of course,
right? But
of course.
But they're different. But they're different problems. They're not.
I agree.
They're not the same problems. So, you're older, you're wiser, and again, doesn't mean you don't have your moments of being foolish here and there. It does happen.
Very foolish.
I've seen. I think your history is interesting, but it's one of those things where I recognize the fact that we're a young country. We, by and large, don't know what we're doing. And it shows. It does show. So
and I think one of the things which South Asian countries had going for them is that there is a lot of small scale industries which are very resilient. Like when my mom, she doesn't go to a mall to buy her vegetables. We have push cart vendors who come on a street and sell their vegetables every day, and we buy from there directly. So they had been coming, and they don't collapse. They are always there. Like people are going to need produce, so you buy that stuff. So you have these small shops, and they're right outside the gate of your community. So it's so much easier to go and buy there compared to going to a mall. Less crowded as well.
Ironically, your small businesses over there were more protected than and actually was a benefit to you guys, not a detriment. Whereas here, they weren't protected at all, or hardly at all. So interesting. I want to talk about something other than COVID, though, because
I'm with you.
Yeah, but I mean, it is interesting to hear, like, just to see the approaches that are how different they've been. So you decided to go. Did you decide to become a scientist? I know you're both, but did you choose a scientific career first, then discovered art later, or did you try getting published first and then you decided to go into science?
So that has a very it's got an interesting story that I don't know whether you are aware of this, but many of the Asian countries, India, China, so many of them, like parents are, at least when I was growing up, parents were quite a bit in control of the careers of their children. And like my dad was that, I want you to be a doctor, and he emotionally blackmailed me that when I was your age, I wanted to be a doctor. I would have even got a medical seat, but I had no money and I had to take up a job. I couldn't be a doctor. So you are my firstborn. You should go ahead and be a doctor. And I felt so bad for him, and I just kind of agreed. So I wrote the entrance, I got through it, and then I took it. I wanted to be a writer even then. But he told me point blank that only losers do these kind of things. Kids who are intelligent should go into the scientific careers. And I was like, okay. I mean, I was just 17 and I didn't have it in me to put up a fight that time. So I said, okay. So I went into it, and one thing led to another. I actually liked neurology and neurosciences, so finally I went into it, and I think I still like it. I like it a lot. I love dealing with patients. I mean, that was my favorite part of being a doctor. Just talking to patients, and I mean, operating is the easiest part. Like surgery is the easiest part. It's just like carpentry. Once you do it, once you've done 10 surgeries, 11th is the same. But I think talking to patients was very interesting for me, just reassuring them, explaining to them what was going on with them. And that is something I do miss. But I don't miss not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, not being able to do other things I love. So
It sounds to me like you did you resent him because of the pressure he put on you? Did you resent him?
I did resent for a bit, but I think I was able to come out of it. I processed it very easily. It's on me. I mean, if I could have said no,
Ultimately,
and
like I said, I've seen it when someone you love puts pressure on you to go a certain way. It's really hard. It's really hard sometimes to say no. It's really
yeah,
hard to and when it's over, it's easy because you never would have gone that way if it wasn't for him. And so that's why I kind of asking that question because resentment does
yeah.
it's more common than I think people realize.
It
So
is, and yeah, I think I did, but I was able to process through those emotions and come out on the other side. And I mean, for me, it was a learning experience. Now I'm more aware when somebody is trying to manipulate me emotionally.
I,
That is one.
I somehow feel it's like a judo chop when someone does that. It's like, oh, I get your game.
Yes,
What happened?
yes,
I just dropped him. So I say I
for
want
sure.
to get your name right because you can be scary. It's like,
Yeah,
but anyways, it's neither
for
here.
sure.
But
Yes.
no, I think one of the most underrated things about being in medical of any kind actually is
Mm,
um, there's a lot of being a doctor that has nothing to do with medicine at all. You are a counselor as much as you are. You're almost a psychologist yourself,
yeah.
the challenge you have. Well, you walk a very interesting line.
Mm,
The line you walk is you're doing your very best to help the patient.
yeah.
The thing about that is the patient also has a big say on how they want to be
Mm,
treated,
yeah.
and you have to respect that, even if you
Mm.
disagree.
I agree. Yeah.
Right? And that's a very tricky line, um, because and
Mm,
some and the thing is, like, I
mhm,
always look at this when I look at medicine. There's three
mm,
experts
mm,
in any medicine. There's
mm.
there's the research, there's the doctor, and then there's the patient, and all
Oh,
of them
absolutely.
bring different expertises into this.
Absolutely.
With the
Mm,
patient, they know how their body works
mm,
better than anybody.
for sure.
The doctor has understands probably better than the
Mm,
patient exactly
mm,
why certain medicines worked
mm,
and why
mm,
certain medicines didn't work.
mm,
Right? Some of it
mm,
was trial and error,
mm,
but you bring a history, you bring a an expertise of knowing how this stuff
yeah.
works, but
Yeah.
specifically to the patients themselves, because everybody
Mm,
needs different levels of
yeah.
medicine,
Mm,
right? And then ultimately
yeah.
the research for what works and what doesn't, what's
Yeah.
supposed to work and what's not supposed to
Yeah.
work. So there's three levels of expertise.
Mm,
So you're kind of the woman in the middle, or the
yeah.
middle woman, middle man.
Yeah.
You have to. I don't know what your insurance companies are like in India. I
Mm,
can't imagine that
mm,
I would know. I know what they're like here, and sometimes
mm, yeah.
they're how to put this so nicely so I don't get in trouble. They're a necessary evil. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
we'll leave that there.
Yeah.
Um, you can't say too much, especially if you're like practicing over here.
Yeah.
Um, but so you got that to deal with. You also have
Mm,
to deal with what actually works best for the patient,
yeah.
and your job's kind of trying to wade.
Mm,
Like you're almost like
yeah.
you're almost like right in the middle of that, and you have
Yeah.
and and the thing is, unfortunately for you, if things go wrong, you're at fault. No
Yeah.
matter whether even if it's
Yeah.
against
I
your
agree.
even if it's against
Yeah.
on either side, either the
Yeah.
insurance company
Yeah.
or the patient, um,
Yeah.
you're the one that takes the blame, and
Yeah.
you very rarely get the credit
Yeah.
when things go well. And that's kind of that's a really tricky line to walk. Is that was
It is, and I think having been in that career, I think it has definitely made it easier for me to navigate the ups and downs of being in the publishing industry, because the way I look at it, that no matter what I do right now, how much fuck ups I might do, nobody's going to die at the end of it. And I think just knowing that allows me to take more risks as well. Because when you ask, at the end of the day, when you ask yourself the question that what's the worst that can happen, it's not going to be somebody's death.
no,
Mm,
no,
mm,
no. The worst. I mean, there are a lot of good things and a lot of risks.
mm,
I
mm.
think actually, I'm going to ask this really fun. Like, so for you, is it just books, or do you have like aspirations for like film, video game, anything like that? Is there anything like that? Like, what would you
Uh,
like?
yes, because I think for me, books is just one of the mediums, but basically, it's all about telling a story, or even more than telling a story, providing an experience. So I would definitely, I mean, I do have that vision in mind, like, maybe not immediately after 3 years, because in 3 years, it'll take me about 3 years to build things the way I want to. But I do definitely want to uh, expand into other mediums as well.
So 3 years and then you take over.
No, no, 3 years. I have several books which are in the process of being written. So I think I will keep publishing them within that time, and then expand into other things as well.
So okay, so let's go. So best case scenario, your books get optioned for a zillion different things.
Yeah.
I have my little dreams of taking over the world myself, and I know what they are, and I'm working on them as we speak
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing about it is, it sounds to
Mm,
me like in your
mm,
case,
mm,
you're trying to build like a backlog. It's like a because obviously in publishing, your backlist is
mm.
where your money's at.
Backlist. Yes.
It's totally where your money's at.
Yes. Yes.
And so you're trying to get yourself to like a backlist where
Yes.
people like, hey, I love what Swati does here.
Yeah.
Let's go check out all
Yeah.
her other stuff, and then
Right.
you
Yeah.
find a few super fans, and then maybe you get
Yeah.
a television deal. So maybe one of your books
Yeah.
becomes a series. Maybe you
Yeah.
get a video game deal. You're nodding your
Yeah.
head. No, is that no? Is that that's not what you want? What like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, but I mean, these are also some of the things are beyond my control. So I kind of, that's it. I don't call it a goal, I call it a vision. It's something I will work towards. And then if as I think obviously it's one of those things, what they call the headlight approach, because as you, whatever is within the beams of your headlights, you'll see it more clearly. And whatever is beyond the beams, you still don't know how it is. So I don't make very fine-tuned plans for it, for the further things. I just keep a vision, and then I calibrate it as I get closer.
Okay. So then, can I ask this? Do you have an
Mhm.
end goal? Like, do you have like the ultimate end vision of where you'd like to
Yeah.
be in this?
Um, Not, I don't have a grand vision as such for that ultimate thing. For me, it's just being able to make enough money to do what I love.
Okay,
And
that's
that's all.
fair.
Yeah. And for me, it is just telling a story or creating experiences.
Nothing wrong with
Uh,
that. I
yeah.
just figured I'd ask. I
Yeah.
figured I'd ask that because
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
me, what I come to realize in the last
Mm,
year or
mm,
so is so
yeah.
one of my projects I accidentally invented a board game, kind of just
Yeah.
one of those like accidental
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and then it hit me. It's like everything's storytelling. If everything's
Yeah.
storytelling,
Yeah.
right? Then the story I present on the page will
Yeah.
be a different story when I present it on the board,
Right.
or I present it on a video game, or if I present it in a
Yes.
movie. Like they're
Mm.
there's also ultimately the
Yeah.
same story.
Yes.
So and I'm looking at the people that really do well in this. They're not just
Yeah.
selling their story once; they're selling their story
I agree.
multiple
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
and I think and that's where I want to get to. Like I'm not just selling like on the front end, I'm selling it multiple
Yes.
times, but on the back end, I got this really cool backlist of amazing things
Yes.
that are awesome that people want to
Yeah.
read and get excited about. That's kind of that's my
Mm.
vision of what I kind of
Yeah.
want to do writing wise.
Yeah, yeah, and then that is kind of what I want to do as well, because a book is just one way of providing a story experience, and board game, even little videos, kind of things. Those are things. So that's one of the reasons I'm fiddling around with GarageBand and creating some music there and that kind of stuff. So
D, so,
when
so,
I
so you got like a DJ name? Like you got like a band? No.
No, no, no. See, thing is, I'm not a very musical person as such. Like, I don't play any instrument, I don't sing. But I do have an ear for music, and I'm just using that to play around digitally and do something.
That's
Yeah.
that's so cool. You're producing. You're what they would call a music producer. Like you're not
Yeah.
necessarily like you're not you're not
Right.
you're,
Yeah.
you're more of a composer than maybe a
Yeah.
full-fledged musician,
Got
and
it.
that's still
Yeah.
pretty freaking
Yeah.
cool. So
Yeah.
so then I guess I'm asking then I'll ask this Philip just for fun. One day I'll find like an album of your stuff somewhere.
Probably not. I don't think I'm ever going to be that good at music. I don't think it's one of my strengths. I just want enough kind of instrumental music which I can use for my little videos I make for book trailers, or just or if I'm just telling a story through a visual medium. If I want some background, haunting, epic background music, I should be able to create it myself, because buying it's going to be expensive.
It's amazing. That's a very I that's a more valuable skill than that's a very valuable skill. I think because music, especially when you talk about like visual mediums, music
Yeah,
can add so much to a
yeah,
story without
yeah,
ever actually saying a word. Like
yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy is probably the most blatant example of a song of an
yeah,
album track listing being a character in a story.
yeah.
But even even if you look at scores
Yes.
in both video games and
Yeah,
movies,
yeah,
they're very important for tone
yeah,
and and
yeah,
just the whole idea of the story being conveyed. It is such a
yeah,
wild, different experience that
yeah,
it can add so much without seeming to do very much.
yeah,
If it's really really good music, you may not even subconsciously notice it. Right? It's just in the background, and you find yourself elated, or you're sad, or you're
yeah,
angry, or you're laughing, because it can add so much tone to your story.
yeah. I agree. It just provides so much subtext, and it just seeps into the subconscious, exactly like you said. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
look, I'm just gonna say something like and maybe it's not your goal, and I totally get it. It's not your goal. I never imagined I'd be drawing right now, like that
Yeah.
million years.
Yeah, see, that's very cool. I mean, I've been watching that. It's something you've just picked up, and you're already progressing so much.
Well, it was amazing because it
Yeah,
terrified me. Like honest to God, it terrified me, and I was like, okay, I promised myself I want to get into comics. Like that's my
yeah,
two big loves for literature are the
yeah,
pulp, it's like the dime novel, like the Ray Bradbury,
yeah.
Roger Blasney. I love that little niche, and that's what I want
Yes.
to be. Like, that to me seems like the coolest spot. And
Yeah,
I love my poetry too.
yeah,
But my poetry fits
yeah,
more towards the graphic novel
yeah.
side of my
Mm,
personality.
yeah,
It's somewhere there. Like I consider I look at stuff like Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss, in my
yeah,
opinion, is the greatest graphic
yeah,
novelist of all time. And if
yeah,
anyone wants to argue with me, listening
yeah.
or watching this right now, I'll fight you on that. I will legitimately fight you on that. And the thing about that is, right? The thing about that is,
Mm,
um, I have a very visual imagination.
yeah,
So why not? Even if I'm only competent, like this is the thing. Like if I'm only competent at it,
yeah,
and I can tell my stories that way, who knows where that will lead to, right?
yeah.
And I already have a comic script written.
Mm,
It's. I was going to do it last fall, but I think I'm going to keep practicing a little bit longer, keep learning different things,
yeah,
and do a few more things. But
yeah,
while I'm doing all that,
yeah.
I'm going to have a couple more books out in the dime novel era phase of what I want to do.
Yes.
and I'm doing that. Like Lights Out's my next book. It's my homage to Fahrenheit 451 and Nightfall, because I love the classical stuff. And yeah, my main character's name is Montag. So if you get that reference, you understand exactly what I'm doing. But the thing about that is, right, I recognize, like, it's not something I ever imagined. It just, for me, it was a way to solve that problem. Going back to everything we said at the very beginning. You might have done the same. You might have stumbled onto something by accident yourself, right? Yeah, and because that's a very useful skill in a lot of mediums.
Yes, I hope so, because I'm enjoying it. And let's see, I mean, sometimes it's just that, when you enjoy doing something, then you just push into a little bit, lean into it a bit more intentionally, and many fun things come up. So I'm going to go into it with an explorer mindset and see where it takes me.
That's all I've done with the art. That's all I've done with it. It's just like I'm having fun. I'm not really worried about being. I find this is something I've learned as I've gotten older. I've stopped worrying about being good. If that actually makes, I don't worry about that so much anymore. I worry about telling the story I want to tell, whatever that story actually is, and the rest of it either will work out or it won't. And but again, going back to something, like, I'm not fear of failure, but I'm not afraid to be foolish. I'm not afraid that I'm not ready. I'm not afraid of, like, any of that crap. Let's just go out there, see what happens. If I fall on my face, just call me Launchpad and quack.
Yeah. I know, I get what you mean, because I think initially when I started writing, I was too hung up on that idea of being good, and it was actually holding me back. It's like, it's even when you're making a presentation and you're feeling very conscious, it basically it prevents you from presenting at your full potential. And I think even in writing it's like that. When you're always worried about how it comes across and whether it's good or not, it actually, I feel it weakens the writing, weakens the story in some way.
Well,
it happened with me, at least. And I had to give up on that perfectionism in order to progress.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so my next guest tomorrow, English is her second language. It's not her first language, and she's terrified of the fact that she might sound bad. I'm like, don't worry about it. Just, I don't think people realize how powerful just being yourself actually is, and that's true with your art too. It's like what we tell the same kind of stories. I mean, I'm writing about killer cupcakes in one of mine. I mean, I may not have been your first choice. It was my first choice, but that's okay, right? But the point is, right, I'm still telling essentially the same stories you are, but what I'm bringing to it is me, right? That's what I'm bringing to it. And even if I don't get it all right, it's not about necessarily getting it all right. It's about the fact that I'm being as honest and forthrightly myself to the best of my ability. Now, I'm going to hire an editor because my shit does stink. That never won't change ever. But that doesn't mean I don't need the greatest book. I just need a good enough book, right? To keep one that's better than my last book. That's my goal. Is the next story I'm telling, am I saying something that I'm passionate about? And is it better than the thing that came before it? Right?
Yeah.
Right? That's it. I don't worry about anything else, because if I get better, everybody's going to notice. It's even true of the podcast. Like, sometimes I don't always have the greatest show. Like, I've gotten better at it, but everyone's like, I've had those, like, last year, my limitations like drove me nuts for parts of the year, because I just like, I can do better than this, but I can't do better than this right now. It drove me crazy. Right? But all that to say, but eventually I just, you know what, I'm just going to keep putting it out there, because inevitably that's going to create momentum in of itself.
Yes, I fully agree, and I have come to see the wisdom of it. If you had told me the same thing 10 years ago, I would have argued and disagreed. But I think I've started seeing the wisdom of that, and I think only after I realized that have I made progress. Before that, I was just stagnating. It's like, there's a cauldron full of your ego, and you're just swimming into it. It doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, I realized something, like there's perfection as the ideal, and we all try to like the very best. Like, so this is the trick on this. So I like your work, how you work is how you worship. There's a really fine line with that,
Yeah.
and I like my day job or like my temp job. I don't care about it that much, but I still make a conscious effort to do the best I
Yeah.
can with the job tasks I'm given. Not because I care, but because I recognize the fact that the work I'm putting in there
Yeah.
is going to impact my work here,
For sure.
right? That because it doesn't. It's the habits you build, and so perfection as a model of that ideal is great, but I also accept the fact that I'm never going to achieve perfection. I'm going to
Yeah.
deal with progression instead, and that as a result of that's the result I'm going for. Like,
Yeah.
was I better than my last one?
Yeah.
Even if it's inches, was I better? I think the next is my second. That I don't know if you may have noticed this with your stuff. That first novel, second novel, like there's a huge jump in what you can do,
Yes, I fully agree. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like I don't know, like for me, it's like I can't wait to unveil the next book because it's definitely an evolved style.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, the first book which I've written, I've just kept it inside the drawer. I'm not even. That time when I wrote it, I was thinking of publishing it, and now when I look back at it, I just feel so glad I haven't. It just felt kind of stiff, and not just stiff. I felt the characters were not really fully fleshed out, which something obviously is something I learned along the way. I think I had my major problem was with writing. My major weakness with writing initially was I could not write emotion. That is something I had to really learn to do it. And now that I have learned it, when I go back and read my first book, I'm like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking?
That's how it should be. Like my
Yeah,
very first novel's in my hard
yeah,
drive. It's never
yeah,
going to be revealed. Like
yeah,
it's light of day. My
yeah,
second novel was a train wreck. Like
yeah,
I broke. It's a broken novel. I broke it.
yeah, yeah,
My third novel was the first one
yeah,
I published,
yeah,
but the fourth, like the difference between the third and the fourth, I can already
yeah,
tell is just
yep, yeah,
so much better because
yeah,
I'm more confident, which is good.
yeah, yeah.
Confident. Well, we'll see about confident. We'll see when it comes out how that goes. But
Mm,
the whole
mm,
idea is the whole idea for me is I
mm,
recognize the fact that like this is my voice has changed. Like you,
mm,
like one of the other reasons that you couldn't release your first book is
mm.
that's not who you are now.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
Mm,
So I should ask this because I know what emotions I do well and which ones I struggle with.
mm.
Which ones are still kick you in the pants?
Uh, about parts of writing or just emotions?
Like the emotion, like for example, like I know I can't write joy very well because joy is very
Oh,
hard to write.
yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
projecting joy
yeah,
is super hard.
yeah. I cannot write romance well at all. Any if there is any love story happening between two characters, I just cannot do it because I don't know. I mean, my husband and I, we were friends before we married. We were friends for a long time, and I always look at love as a kind of friendship. So I can never write the kind of romance and the thing which people do seem to write, and that is definitely one of my weaknesses, which I would like to develop. I'm actually working on it right now.
Okay.
So that is one. Uh, I think that is the weakness. And other thing is I cannot write short stories at all. I just cannot think of plots which are short story worthy because as soon as I think of a story idea, it's like there's
It's
a
bigger.
drop down menu in my head and it expands into plots and subplots and 50 characters, and then it just
You build a skyscraper when you write your stories. It's a skyscraper. Like it's not a little house. It's a skyscraper,
yeah,
and there's nothing
yeah,
wrong. Like you are
yeah,
who you are.
yeah,
Our flaws are what make
yeah,
us the
yeah,
creators we
yeah,
are.
of course, yeah,
Yeah, and
right, yeah,
and I say that actually in the best kind of ways because
mm,
it's what makes us unique. And
yeah,
honestly, that's the important thing. So you
yeah.
do poetry. So when you decide, so when did you make that decision to take the plunge into writing? Like, was it 10 years ago? Was it earlier?
I think Actually, that idea was always there at the back of my mind, that someday when I'm more independent in multiple ways, I'm going to do it. I think that idea was always there at the back of my mind, and it just kept. I think when my father died in 2006 or 2005, one of those years, and that's the time when it really hit me, because he always used to say that he was into stock market and all that kind of stuff, which always keeps one busy. So he always used to say that someday I'm going to give up all this and I want to do the things which matter to me. And I had been hearing that from the time I was a child. He had said that so many times, but he never got around to doing it. And then he just died. Became old and he died. And I thought that, I mean, this is exactly what happens to people. They keep saying that someday I'll do this, and that someday never really comes. So it was, yeah. So I think
No, I
that's
mean,
when that idea kind of consolidated.
so I always kind of dreamed that, like when I started the podcast, my goal was ultimately to turn this into a talk show.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, someday I'll get there. And it occurred to me about 6 months into being a freelancer, this is my niche. What am I doing? Right? Like, what am I doing? I should just embrace it in full and just see where it goes. And that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah.
No, someday is, I think the worst nightmare, the worst thought you can have in your head is that someday. Someday never comes. It's either it's now or it's never.
Yeah.
And I know I sound
Yes.
very
Yeah.
urgent when I say that, but it's the truth. Like there's when I go to sleep, there's no guarantee I'm going to wake up tomorrow. There's none.
Oh,
Like
exactly. Yeah. I agree.
so,
Oh, that someday. Someday is a weasel word.
no, it's an evil world. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
an evil word. Like
Yeah.
what drives you now? What do you want to do now? That's really driving you. Because honestly, that's what matters. The rest of this, not much in this life matters. Like honestly, not a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah.
People you love, doing things you love,
Yeah. Exactly.
not much else really.
Yeah. Absolutely. And before I took the plunge, I used to actually be afraid of dying. I had this fear of death. And the fear was always because, there are things which I want to do, and I've still not started doing them. And, what if I die before that? Now I don't have that fear. Like I've been doing what I love doing. And now I feel that even if I die tomorrow, it's not going to, I'm not going to have regrets. Like if somebody tells me that I'm going to die tomorrow. So it's obviously I have not reached the milestones where I want to reach, but at least I'm following the journey. So
Yeah, no, see, I'm in a unique spot. Like there are some things I still want to explore. You know, on the I'm being honest, on the romantic end of things, there's some things I definitely would like to explore more before it's all said and done. But honestly, in terms of everything else, I've done pretty much everything I've wanted to do. Um, I've never been crazy about the house, the car, the kids, and I've never been crazy about that, and I've never really focused on it. Now that I've gotten a little older, some of that's appealing. I mean, but not for the reasons that a lot of people would imagine. It's not that I don't want necessarily a house, but I have to have a reason for it. So then I don't want a car. I just have to have a reason for it. Now I'm at the point now.
yeah.
I see the reason for a car for me. I finally see it. So guess what? I'm going to do that this year. Because one of my other goals with this, what I'm doing here, I'm going to get myself a camera. I'm going to try. Well, I have a camera. I just got to get it out of storage. I'm going to go grab it, and I'm going to go and I'm going to across the country, maybe even across the world, go meet people like yourself who are awesome, and then just chat like this, because these are the best kind of stories.
Yeah, and I think you'll be very good at it, because it is something which comes naturally to you, and it's from inside of you. It's not something which is superimposed.
No.
So exactly.
No, it's something I have to admit. Like when I made the decision to do the podcast, I had to commit to it. Like that's I think the hard part. I think the hard part for the hardest part for me is sometimes I judge no one, but it's really hard sometimes with your own internal convictions to keep that in check, because there are things you just want to say. It's not about me.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
You probably should understand that more than I do, because you were a doctor. and you dealt with that probably quite a bit. Like,
Yes.
but I have to because I mean, you can't force someone to be healed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I think this video thing which you started, video interviews, they are really good. I think you have found your niche there because I have seen both. I mean, I have listened to your podcasts as well as videos, and while your podcasts are good, these video ones are really powerful. Um,
Thank you.
and you're on to something there for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know like I still will do like the pod in terms of people that want to listen to it audio. Like I still make
Of
them,
course. Yeah.
but it's not the same focus anymore either. This
Yeah.
is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do going forward. Beyond all that, though, so your niche. So you say 3 years. So in 3 years, what's the rollout? Like what's like? I mean, things can happen. Like God may laugh at you. I'm hoping He doesn't, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
What do you see yourself doing in 3 years? Because you said it takes you 3 years to build where you want to get to. So
Yeah. Well, in 3 years, my main thing is my end goal for 3 years is to have enough income to be comfortable doing what I want without constantly worrying about where my money is going to come from. I think that is my practical baseline goal. But beyond that, one thing I'm really excited about right now is my husband's series, which I'm editing. His debut novel just came out 2 3 weeks ago, and obviously I'm biased, but I think that is a breakout kind of a series. So I've been working on that, and uh, I edited the first book. I made some illustrations. So I'm going to continue doing that with the subsequent books in the series because I'm a passionate advocate of that series. So
awesome.
that is one thing. And I have a couple of my own series going as well. So I will publish some, I'll keep publishing books from that in the coming 3 years.
So I don't have an answer to this yet. Give me a few more months and I'll have an answer I think for us. But I think you've been doing it longer than I have. What's your favorite thing to draw?
Favorite thing to draw?
Yeah.
You know, it, my answer would have been different to this 1 year ago, but now I find I love drawing abstract things. Like I like to draw an emotion. It's almost like meditation. So for me, that's my favorite kind of drawing. I mean, obviously, I have drawn illustrations for people's book covers. I've done those kind of things, and I love doing that. But I think the thing where I really go into the zone is when I draw that just abstract thing, like any emotion which I'm feeling or something, just an abstract, which especially I know I created a couple of paintings last year which depicted a sense of wonder, and I think those are my favorite. So I like painting an emotion.
I like painting an emotion. Okay. I'm going to ask: is there like a particular influence in terms of like an artist that you admire that brought this on, or just this is you seeking to understand your own emotions? Because you seem like someone that's very in your head, and much like me, once upon a time, you said, "This is okay. I gotta get out of my head and into my heart." And is this the way to do it?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's precisely how I think. I think I'm primarily in my head, and then I have to remind myself to connect it to the heart, because obviously when you're just in the head, whatever output happens is a bit dry. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really moving. So that is something I had in fact to learn to do it, to connect the head and the heart, and I think it's going to be a work in progress forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, obviously, like I said, your voice will change too, and your voice.
Yeah.
I think art is the constant exploration of who you are in the world and
Yes.
understanding yourself in this world. It doesn't matter if it's
Yes.
writing or drawing
Yeah.
or whatever it is. I think
Yeah.
that's why a big part of why I do what I do.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 years, you're going to be financially stable. Then I guess I'm going to ask the big question, and then we're going to wrap up the interview, I think.
Yes.
And that's this: what do you want? What do you want to do in 3 years? Like you said, what do you like? You're comfortable enough to do. So 3 years from now, you're rich and shameless, and you're able to do whatever it is you want to do. What is that? What is that?
It's interesting, but I just want to be able to keep writing and keep drawing, and not have to worry about money while in the process. See, I think then the reason why I'm doing it, for me, any form of art, which includes writing as well, is to, for me, there are three things which are important in life: meaning, purpose, and connection. And I think my art helps me with all three. I mean, my art allows me to do all three, and I think that's exactly what it. I think it's a journey which can never end. So my goal is to just be financially independent with my artistic endeavors, such that I can continue that journey. Mm.
That's awesome. By the way, congrats on your Aurora. That's awesome.
Thank you, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're part of the same club now. The Aurora, the
Yes,
Aurora.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
Aurora.
yes.
So, do you have anything coming out soon? I should ask that right now.
Yeah, I do have. See, like I had published a self-help book which was about preventing burnout, and that's a book which I explored the theory of inner fire. Now I have a sequel to that book coming out, and that book was more about the theory of inner fire, whereas this book is more about the practice of inner fire, how you can actually use the theory and put it in practice, that kind of thing. So that book will be coming out sometime in the end of January.
Okay,
Uh, yeah,
cool. You got a
yeah.
cover? Got an awesome cover of it?
I do.
All right, I'm gonna
And
ask to steal that from you so I can actually
yes,
do the audio
yes,
version of the
yes,
show.
yes, yeah, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Self-help was an interesting thing which I just stumbled into. I never thought I would do it, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah. Uh,
It's amazing how much you deal with your own experiences to help other people, isn't it?
yes, yes.
So,
But yeah, I mean, I think primarily I'm a fantasy writer. I'm more than a self-help writer, and I will have book coming, my novel also coming out later this year, but not in immediate future.
well, that's fine. So, but the self help book's coming out.
Yeah.
Uh, did you have anything come out like within the last 3 months as well?
Uh,
Yay!
no, only no, not my own book. It was just the illustrations for my husband and for another author and that kind of stuff.
You
Yeah.
can
But
promote that.
not my own book. Yeah.
But you can promote that too. I mean, you are an illustrator and you are awesome,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Oh, I drew maps for his book. I love those maps.
yeah, well, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
maps can be so fun.
Yeah.
So when I used to work for the author, that although we really went south, I did learn how to make a cool treasure map. And the secret is a
Yeah.
blowtorch. Take a map, do a little
Yeah.
blowtorch underneath, and you've got
Yeah.
instantly it looks all and
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's how you make a treasure map, ladies and gentlemen, with a blowtorch.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
The secret ingredient is fire. Everything. I mean, that's not. Um. All right then. So why don't we end it like this then? We talk about your self help book, what it actually deals with in terms of burnout, and then how people can find you, and then I'll wrap the show up.
So I have, my website is swatichowda.com. This is my first name, last name.com. And that's my website where I put up stuff about my personal stuff as well as my books. And I have another website called the Writing Vault, and that is mainly about my editing and my art portfolio, which that website is still work in progress, but it's there. So that is the Writing Vault. And yeah, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn as well under my name.
Yeah, and folks, she's secretly one of the nicest people you'll meet on social media.
Yes.
Yeah. She makes fun of me. Well, she lets me be silly all the time, and I get away with it. So that'll do it. Swati, I am glad I got the chance to actually meet you like this. So, beer, Calgary, when words
Yes.
collide, at some
Yes.
point in the future, we will do it, and it'll be fun, and it will be amazing. Depending on what time of year that actually gets held on, maybe we do one of like those St. Patty's green beers. Maybe that'd be a thing. Maybe.
We should drink Corona actually.
Yeah, good. Nine. Now I got the Weird Al song in my head. 9 Coronas. Anyways, that's neither here or there. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys had a fantastic new year. I want to thank Swati for coming on to my show. And tomorrow, Amara is going to be my guest from Pakistan. As we go international for the rest of this week, I have guests from Pakistan, Greece, France, and my last is an art lesson in Hawaii. Oh, that reminds me. You want to come back and draw with me at some point?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how that will work, but yes, definitely. See, I'm always game for any of your shows because they're so much fun.
Well, the drink and draw works. We still do kind of an interview, but at some point we just shift to you and you're drawing something awesome, and we'll just shoot the breeze while we go.
Yes, absolutely. I'm
That
all
sounds
for
like
it.
fun. All right,
Yes.
we'll talk about that after.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching or listening, depending on which platform you chose to quote this podcast. If you want to subscribe, click the subscribe button on both my Twitch channel and my YouTube channel, Josh Pintel Resco. Just Josh and Podcast is my Twitch. If you want to listen to it, I'm on Podomatic on any app you like. Stay inspired, stay shining in the darkness, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.